Hi everyone and welcome to the next part of There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. Today we start with chapter 30. Bradley remained in his seat after everyone else had gone out to recess. He walked to Mrs. Ebble's desk. She was sorting papers. Mrs. Ebble, he said timidly, may I use the hall pass? I have to see the counsellor. She looked up. Please? Normally, Mrs. Ebble would never allow Bradley Chalkers loose in the halls, but something about the way he asked must have changed her mind. All right, Bradley, she said, but then caught herself. But if you're bad, you'll never be allowed in the halls of this school again. Thank you. He took the hall pass off the hook behind her desk and headed out the door. You're welcome, Mrs. Ebble said to herself. He knocked on the door to Carla's office. How nice to see you today, Bradley, she greeted him. I appreciate your coming to see me. He shook her hand, and they sat around the round table. She was wearing the skirt with the squiggles on it. It was the one she wore the first time he saw her. He liked it, but not as much as the one with the mice. I did my homework last night, he said. Carla beamed. I'm so proud of... I ripped it up. What? I ripped it up. I brought it to school and I was just about to put it on Mrs. Ebble's desk, but then I ripped it up. Why did I rip it up? He asked her first. I don't know. Why did you? He shrugged. She shrugged. And they both giggled. I was afraid you'd be mad with me, Bradley said when he stopped giggling. Carla shook her head. You did your homework. That's the important thing. I'm so very proud of you, Bradley Chalkers. I'm going to do all my homework from now on, he promised. That's wonderful. But what if I keep ripping it up, he asked. Well, why would you want to do that? I don't know. I didn't think I wanted to rip it up today. The main thing is that you did it, and you learned some things by doing it, didn't you? What of means, said Bradley. What of means? Carla repeated. Times, said Bradley. She stared at him, baffled. Oh, right, she said, as it all of a sudden connected for her. Okay, so even though you ripped up your homework, you still remembered what you learned. You didn't rip up your memory, and when Mrs. Ebble gives you the next arithmetic test, you'll know how to answer the questions. If they don't change the rules, said Bradley. What rules? Like, what if they decide to make of mean subtraction? They won't change any rules, Carla assured him, whoever they are. But what if I rip up my test too? He asked. Carla looked at him as if he was being silly. Has Mrs. Ebble given you any homework for tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow's Saturday. Okay, for Monday then? No, we never have homework over the weekend. He spoke like an expert, like he'd been doing homework for years. But we do have a book report due next week. Only what? I don't have a book. And Mrs. Wilcott won't let me check any out from the library. Well, let's see, said Carla. Do you think you might know somebody else who might let you borrow a book? Think hard now. Bradley turned around and looked at all the books in her office. May I borrow one of yours, please? He asked. Please? I won't scribble in it. Carla walked around the table and picked out a book from a stack on top of one of her bookcases. It's my favourite, she said, as she gave it to Bradley. He read the title and laughed. My Parents Didn't Steal an Elephant by Uriah C. Lasso. He opened to page 1 and read the first sentence. I hate tomato juice. He thought that was a funny sentence to start a book. He continued reading. Every morning, Aunt Ruth gives me a glass of tomato juice, and every morning I tell her I hate it. Fine, Dumpling, she always says, don't drink it. She calls me Dumpling. Uncle Boris calls me Cornflake. They're crazy. One of these days, I'm afraid, they're going to try and eat me. He glanced up at Carla, then returned to the book. My parents are in jail. They got arrested for stealing an elephant from the circus, only they didn't do it. If they stole an elephant, I'd know about it, wouldn't I? I mean, if your parents stole an elephant, don't you think you'd know about it? I think the elephant just ran away. Her master was always mean to her. He whipped her and made her do stupid tricks. My parents used to complain about that a lot. That's why everyone thinks they stole her. So anyway, that's why I have to live with my crazy Aunt Ruth and Uncle Boris. If you ask me, they belong in the circus. They're crazy. Uncle Boris always smokes a cigar. It just hangs out the corner of his mouth. And whenever he kisses my aunt, he swings the cigar out of the way with his tongue and kisses her at the side of his mouth. Mwah. I bet you think that Aunt Ruth doesn't like it when he kisses her that way. Wrong. She always laughs when he does it. Sometimes she smokes a cigar too. I told you they were crazy. Look, he even smokes his cigar while he's drinking tomato juice. The bell rang. Bradley was amazed by how quickly the time had passed. Do you want to have lunch together again? He asked. I'm sorry, I'm having lunch with the president of the school board, said Carla. I'd much rather eat lunch with you, though. He didn't mind too much. At least he had her book to read. They shook hands. Then he walked back to class. He placed the hall pass back on the hook and took his seat. He knew he'd write a good book report because he had such a good book to read. I just hope I don't rip it up. Chapter 31. What you doing, Bradley? Asked Ronnie. He's reading, Bartholomew replied nastily. He doesn't want to be disturbed. He thinks he's too good for us now that he does his homework. Oh, be quiet and let him read if that's what he wants to do, said Ronnie. Thanks, Ronnie, said Bradley. I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd understand, mimicked Bartholomew. Ronnie understood. She knew about Carla. Bradley returned to his book. Uncle Boris and Aunt Ruth are married. I bet you thought you already knew that, except you're not as smart as you think you are. They were my uncle and aunt even before they got married. Uncle Boris is my mother's brother and Aunt Ruth is my father's sister. They didn't know each other until my parents got arrested for stealing the elephant. Then they both came here to take care of me. Ha! They fell in love and got married a week later. It was sickening. You're lucky you weren't there. I've been cheated out of an aunt and an uncle. If they'd each marry someone else, then I'd have 2 aunts and 2 uncles. Now I only have 1 aunt and 1 uncle. I wonder what happened to the other aunt and uncle I don't have. I wonder if they married each other too. Bradley looked up. He tried to make sense out of that last paragraph. It made him think. Lots of parts of this book made him think. That was one of the things he liked about it. It made him think about his father too, and about why the man who shot him wasn't in jail. There was a knock on the door. His mother entered holding a piece of paper. Oh, you're reading, she said. That's good. It's a good book, he replied. I just got this letter from the Concerned Parents Organisation, she said. There's going to be some sort of meeting about Miss Davis, your counsellor. Bradley's heart fluttered. It says if I've got any complaints, I should come to the meeting. She shrugged her shoulders. I don't have any complaints. She seems to be helping you. Do you have any complaints? Oh, no, he doesn't have any complaints, Claudia laughed, coming in behind her mother. He's in love with her. I heard him say it to his animals. What? Bradley exclaimed in a very high-pitched voice. Claudia snickered. Look, Mummy's blushing. That proves he loves her. Bradley wished he could crawl under his bed and hide. That doesn't prove anything, said Mrs. Chalkers. Quit teasing your brother. Where'd you get the book, Bradley? Claudia asked like she already knew the answer. His heart was beating very fast. Carla gave it to me. Carla gave it to him, Claudia repeated. Well, I don't care where he got the book, said Mrs. Chalkers. I'm just happy to see him reading it. The only reason he's reading is because he's in love with this teacher, said Claudia. Oh, she's not my teacher, she's my counsellor, said Bradley. Claudia roared with laughter. His mother laughed too, but she quickly covered her mouth. Oh, I didn't say I was in love with her, Bradley insisted. We were just talking about my counsellor, not my teacher, that's all. Are you going to let him marry her, Mum? Asked Claudia. Mrs. Chalkers smiled. Well, I don't know. She seems like a very lovely girl, though. Bradley felt like he was going to die of embarrassment. His sister was hysterical. So, you don't have any complaints about Miss Davis? His mother asked seriously, getting back to the letter. She's fine, he said without emotion. Claudia snickered. Well then, I won't go to the meeting, said his mother. Come on, let's leave your brother alone. The Concerned Parents Organisation never likes anything, said Claudia. They're always causing trouble at my school too. They want to turn kids into robots. Bradley watched his sister and mother walk out of his room and shut the door behind them. He lay down on his bed. His face was on fire. So I love her. What's wrong with that? Nothing, said Ronnie. They just don't understand about love. The door opened again. Claudia stuck her face inside and said, If the Concerned Parents Organisation ever found out that Carla kissed you, she'd be fired for sure. Chapter 32. Bradley paid close attention as Mrs. Ebel taught arithmetic. He nodded his head every time she said something that he already knew. Once he almost raised his hand to answer a question, but he lost his nerve. Somebody else gave the answer he would have given. I knew it, he thought as he nodded his head. He spent recess in the library reading My Parents Didn't Steal an Elephant by Uriah C. Lasso. And when he was leaving the library, Mrs. Wilcott stopped him and said, You were reading, weren't you? Yes. Good for you, Bradley. Good for you. He smiled now as he remembered it. It's because of Carla's book, he thought. The book was his lucky charm. As long as he had it with him, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. His black eye was all gone too. When the bell rang for lunch, he put his arithmetic book away and took out his lucky book and walked to Mrs. Ebel's desk. Please, may I borrow the hall pass, please? He asked. She let him have it. He knew she would. He was holding the magic book. He walked to Carla's office, and just as he was raising his fist to knock on the door, she opened the door. Bradley, what a pleasant surprise. You want to have lunch together? He asked. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't. I have to go to the principal's office. What's the matter? He joked. Did you get into trouble? She didn't laugh at his joke. She shrugged her shoulders and then headed towards the principal's office. Maybe she really did get in trouble, Bradley thought as he watched her go. It's probably because she doesn't believe in rules. She must have broken one without knowing it. I should have warned her. But he wasn't too worried. He couldn't imagine anything bad ever happening to Carla. He walked through the auditorium and outside to the playground. He sat down on the steps outside the auditorium and ate his lunch. At least he had her book with him. It was almost as good as eating lunch with her. He didn't read while he ate. He was afraid he might accidentally spill food on the book, even though there was no such thing as an accident. Colleen Verigold walked by. Hello, Colleen, he called to her. She stopped, looked at him oddly, and then walked away without returning his hello. Bradley didn't mind. He had said hello to Colleen because he knew Carla would appreciate it. He felt Carla was watching over him, and it didn't matter that Colleen didn't say hello back, because in his heart he heard Carla say, Hello, Bradley. It's a pleasure to see you today. He finished eating, then opened the book. Guess what they've done now? They've wallpapered the garage. I told you they were crazy. Who ever heard of anybody putting wallpaper on the walls of a garage? Purple paper with yellow polka dots. I don't even know how they got in there. The garage has been locked shut for months. The lock was broken or something, so nobody could get in. At least I'm glad they finally got it open. It was beginning to smell pretty bad. You could smell it from the driveway. Now it just smells like paste. I can't wait until my parents get home and put an end to all this craziness. Their trial is next week. They have to be found innocent. I mean, if they stole an elephant, I'd know about it, wouldn't I? Where could you hide an elephant? Look, he's reading, said Robbie. I didn't know he knew how to read, laughed Curtis. Bradley looked up. He was surrounded by Jeff and his gang. He can't read, said Brian. He just looks at the pictures. They all laughed. What you reading? Said Russell. Bradley closed the book and slowly stood on the concrete steps. Chicken chalkers, said Dan. Andy bounced a basketball. Bradley glanced behind him. Doug was blocking the door to the auditorium. What's the matter, Bradley? He asked. Hey, Chalkers, what's the name of your book? Asked Robbie. He looked at his book and then stared defiantly at Robbie. Let me see it, said Robbie. Bradley clutched it against his chest. No matter what, he was not going to let them harm Carla's book. Oh, come on, Bradley. Be a pal, said Robbie. I just want to see it. Curtis chuckled. Robbie stepped up towards him. You can't read anyway, he said. Give it to me and I'll read it to you. He reached out and rested his hand on the book. Bradley jerked it away. Uh-oh, I think he's getting angry, said Brian. I just want to see it, said Robbie, and again he reached for the book. Bradley held it under his left arm against his chest, and he made his right hand into a fist. Robbie backed away. Jeff, he called. Come on, Jeff, teach him a lesson, said Dan. Jeff stepped between Andy and Russell. All right, said Curtis. Hold on, said Andy. Let him get off the steps. The boys backed up. Bradley, clutching his book, walked down the concrete steps to where Jeff was waiting. Do you want me to hold your book for you, Bradley? Said Andy. Bradley glanced at him. Don't worry, he said sincerely. I won't hurt it. Bradley handed Andy the book and then looked back at Jeff. They stood on a patch of grass and dirt and faced each other. The bruise around Jeff's eye had turned brown with a greenish tint. Jeff raised his fists. The other boys formed a circle around them. Come on. Get him, Jeff, urged Brian. Give him another black eye, said Russell. Bradley readied himself. He raised his fists in the air and then lowered them. He had an idea. Hello, Jeff, he said. Robbie snickered. Jeff stared at him wide-eyed. Hello, Bradley, he replied. Bradley smiled and he held out his hand. Jeff smiled too, and it was his first honest smile in a long time. He shook his best friend's hand. Oh, the other boys were dumbfounded. No one said a word, and Andy finally broke the ice. Would you like to play basketball, Bradley? Bradley looked at him bewildered. I'm not very good, he said. So, none of us are, said Jeff, patting him on the back. Now we'll have even teams, said Robbie. Chapter 33. Bradley was terrible. He dribbled with two hands. He passed the ball to people who weren't on his team, but worst of all, whenever anyone passed the ball to him, he stopped to say thank you. And that is where we will pick up later this week. I think we'll probably do one more video on Wednesday, and then we'll have a live stream on Friday to celebrate the very end of There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom by Louis Sachar. I hope you're enjoying it, and I will see you all soon. Bye.